Good morning. I'm Mimi Lichtenstein. Welcome back to Adventures in Luxury Travel. Today, I am very excited to have on Rishi Sarma from And Beyond, and we are going to talk all about Bhutan, a place that I've been dying to go to and actually was planning to take my daughter to last year as her graduation present, but that was slightly derailed. So today I'm excited to have Rishi here to tell us all about Bhutan. Rishi, welcome. And perhaps you can give us a little bit of an idea about what about Bhutan you love so much.
Thank you for having me, Mimi. It's lovely to join everyone. I just wanted to quickly tell you a little about myself. I got here by pure luck. I used to manage a lodge in central India, and then we were on a holiday, and me and my wife, we were just thinking about, what a beautiful country. We would love to come here someday. And one day, while still at the lodge, I got a call saying there is an opportunity in Assam, in Bhutan, and would you like to go? And that's how I got here. What I love about this country is, it is probably the only country which is a carbon negative country. So you have about 70% of the country still under forested land. So beautiful country with a lot of greenery around. You can go hiking, you can go trekking. Absolutely love it. Beautiful, very good bird life as well. So those of us who are into birds absolutely love this country, and genuinely warm people. So when you come here, you'll realize that people are always smiling, happy to help you, happy to show you around, and that's what I love about Bhutan.
And I think as we look at this beautiful video you're sharing about all the different places you can go to in Bhutan, the wonderful thing about it is it's obviously such a unique and different culture for Americans, as well as it has so many opportunities for active travelers and for people who are really curious about, a way of life that's very different than how we live. So I'm really excited to dive into this with you today. So I'm going to stop the video, and that way you can share the map and give us a little bit of an overview about the country and where people would be going when they come to visit. And I love this picture, by the way. For those of you who are listening, it's an absolutely stunning picture of Bhutan with mountains in the background and farmlands in the front. It just looks beautiful. So tell us all about Bhutan.
Right. So I just thought I'll quickly point out where Bhutan is, because it's a tiny Himalayan kingdom sandwiched between two giants. You have India to the south, and then you have China to the north. And this little country, and it actually comes down to their culture as well, because they have always believed that, you have to preserve nature in order to survive. And that's why you have 70 to 75% of the land still under forested cover. And thankfully, they are probably taking in all the pollution that India and China produce. Not all, but whatever they can.
Yeah.
So when you look at this map, I just wanted to quickly touch on, when you come to Bhutan, where do people usually go? So you can see Thimphu very clearly on the map, Paro very clearly on the map, Punakha, and then there is a black dot right next to where Bhutan is written. That's actually the Gangte Valley. So that's all in the western portion of Bhutan. And then Jakar is also known as Bumthang. So that's central Bhutan. So majority of tourism actually happens in these valleys. And so it's concentrated to the central and the western parts of the country. Not much happens in the eastern portion of the country.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I think there are some people, tourists, as you said, mainly stay on the western portion. But if you are a little bit of an adventurer and you want to go to more of the off the beaten path places, that there are opportunities to go to the eastern portion. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, especially for people who are looking to get away from, especially if you're coming in the peak season, and you want to get away from the crowds, then eastern Bhutan is absolutely stunning, untouched. Very different, actually, even culturally. I'll point that out later when we are talking. And also for people who have already come to Bhutan before, that's a great place to explore on their second visit.
Okay, great. Well, let's dive into some of the cool experiences we can have when visiting.
Sure. I thought I'll just quickly, tell you a little about each of the valleys that I just pointed out on the map. So let me start with Thimphu, which is the capital. It is basically the urban center, and this is the most urban setting that the guests will get when they come into Bhutan. But what I really like about Thimphu is that although it has grown and become very modern, they have kept their traditions alive. Um, and this is also thanks to GNH, I guess, which is the gross national happiness, which you would have heard about before.
Yes.
So, and it's a great place to actually go and interact with locals, because you have these beautiful weekend markets where all the locals come and sell their produce. You have the weaving centers, you have the arts and crafts school where students are still being taught the traditional arts and crafts of Bhutan, so that things like that. For example, a small example of that would be when you go around Bhutan, you would see paintings on the buildings of Bhutan. So to keep that tradition alive, they are still teaching their kids, all these arts and crafts. Also visiting the paper factory, coming to know how the traditional papers were made, and basically these are paper which are used by the monks to write their scriptures and so on, so that it doesn't get mites or it doesn't get spoiled. Also, Thimphu has the largest sitting Buddha in the world at 54 meters, called the Buddha Dodherma. So it's a good place to visit, and it overlooks the entire city. Yeah.
For Americans, I think that's about 177 feet, if I'm correct. And it's hard to get perspective when you're looking at this picture, right? But I have another picture that I've seen where you see the little people about, this big at the base of it. So it is, having seen many Buddhas across Thailand, we never saw one that size. So it is quite an impressive sight.
Yeah, absolutely. Next, I wanted to touch on Punaka Valley, which is I feel the most important valley in Bhutan, because it used to be the capital until 1952. Also, this is the agricultural capital of Bhutan, also known as the Rice Bowl, because it produces all the rice and vegetables that can grow at a lower altitude, because Punakha is at about 1100 meters. But the most important thing about this valley is the Zong. The Zong is basically a fortress that you see in front of you in this picture. This was built in 1637, and this used to be the seat of the monarchs until it was shifted to Thimphu. And it is amazing. I mean, they shifted it in 1952, thinking that if they left this as the capital, they would lose all their agricultural lands, and it would become just like another Thimphu. So that's why Thimphu was an area where they didn't have so much agricultural land and had more dry land. That's why they shifted it there. But still very important, because the monk body, which is equally, important as in comparison to the monarchy, they still shift here in the winter, spend the winter in this Zong. Also, every king has to be crowned here before they can take their seat in Thimphu. Apart from the Zong, obviously there are lots of beautiful hikes. There is rafting on the two rivers, the Mochu and the Phochu. Mochu is basically the mother river, and Phochu is the father river, both glacial rivers, so they flow throughout the year. And also very famous for the Fertility Temple, which is, dedicated to the divine madman, or Drukpa Quinlay as he's known. So this saint who basically came into Bhutan, he had a very different method of enlightening people. And he basically said that you can be enlightened and you can still have a sexy, healthy sex life. So, and also he introduced the concept of a phallus. And so whenever it's quite surprising for people when they come to Bhutan and they see all these phallus paintings, big paintings on the sides of houses, or, phalluses hanging on the doorway, or, out in the fields, because it's actually supposed to be warding off, evil. So that's the concept behind the phalluses. There is nothing, kinky going on, really.
Right.
So,
Well, I'll also add in that Thailand also has some fertility type. I don't know if I think it was in a cave, one of the ones that we happened upon, but without any warning, it was like, wait, what is that a statue of? And then all of a sudden you realize that they're all over the place. So it can be a little surprising if you're not prepared for it. So thank you for letting us know.
Great. So, I mean, the guides will obviously tell you all the stories, so I won't get into it here. And then comes the next valley, which I would like to show you is the Gangte Valley. I think it's the most spectacular valley and my favorite. This picture is of the valley from this fabulous little lodge, which is also my favorite in Bhutan, called the Gangte Lodge. So basically, from the Gangte Lodge, what you see is the valley below you. So the Gangte Lodge is slightly at an elevation. And this view is going to remain quite similar for years to come, because what you see in front of you is a protected area for the blackneck cranes, which come here, in the winter. So they migrate here in the winter from Tibet and Leh Ladakh, spend their winter here, and then they go back. So they start arriving around November, go back around February. Great place to be in nature. Go for some beautiful hikes overlooking snow-capped mountains, valleys. Also, we love to organize some, picnics here, because you can have, although it's a bit chilly sometimes, beautiful picnic breakfasts or lunch overlooking the valley. Great for meditation sessions. We can have some monks take you up on these hikes to their retreat center and do a meditation for you there.
And
forest bathing. Yeah.
Question about the meditation session. As someone who I every day try to meditate for 5 minutes every morning before I sort of start my day. Sometimes it's more of a struggle than most, but for people who are either new to meditating or, just want to try it out, what is that process like? Is it, hours?
This meditation, this session is not really a full-blown meditation session. It's more about the monk teaching you how to meditate, and also teaching you about meditation using breathing techniques. So it's more just to show you how to meditate, and then it's up to you whether you want to do it going forward or not. So usually we spend an hour with the monk in one of these beautiful locations, and he basically teaches you breathing exercises and
then hopefully when you come home from Bhutan, you're not only have this amazing experience, but you carry your meditation practice with you.
Absolutely. The next valley is Bumthang. What you see in front of you is the Jakar Zong. The Bumthang Valley is actually an amalgamation of 4 valleys. So these 4 are called Bumthang together, but this is actually the spiritual heartland of Bhutan. So you will find Bhutan's oldest temples and most venerated temples here. So basically, the oldest temple is called the Jambe Lakhang that you see on the left-hand side, with the 2, the elderly couple taking a round, or it's called a Kora, which is the round you circumnavigate the temple. It was built in 659 AD by King Songtem Gangpo, who is from Tibet, actually. And he is also the one who introduced Buddhism to Bhutan. So you can actually call it the birthplace of Buddhism in Bhutan, Bumthang. And it is also the region which produces buckwheat and a lot of apples and dairy products. So very important for food as well.
And for those people who are listening on the podcast, there are some colorful photos up here of people decked out in very colorful dress. Is that from one of the local festivals?
Yes, so that's from the Jambe Lakhang Drup, which is basically the local festival there. Happens once a year, and the monks dress up and use these masks, and they perform these different dances, which are basically dances. In the olden days, basically what used to happen is they used to tell stories about Buddhism, and it is true even today, using these dances, because it was easier for them to communicate, teachings through dances and making it interesting for the locals.
Beautiful.
Right.
And this is an iconic photo that many people have seen, and I think inspires many people to even want to come to Bhutan.
Absolutely. I mean, this is Paro Valley, synonymous with Tiger's Nest or Taktsang. Usually the highlight of their trip to Paro for almost 95% of, people who come to
Mhm.
Bhutan. The hike up here is beautiful. It takes about 5 hours, depending on how fit you are. We usually start early in the morning. What we do is go up there uh, before and reach that place as it opens. So at about 8 o'clock, you'll be up there as it opens. The reason why we do it is you get to explore the place on your own, because most of the other people in the valley will start coming up only after their breakfast. So
Mm.
what we do is we either have an early breakfast at the place where we are staying, or we ask them to pack us a nice breakfast, and we hike up there, visit the place, and then when you are actually coming down, other people are going up.
Yeah.
So you literally have the whole place to yourself early in the morning. Even if someone is not able to hike all the way, there is an option of actually going halfway or going halfway on horseback. We don't really recommend it because it's really steep. Some of the sides are really steep, so the horses are really walking on the sides, and people do get scared. But it is quite an experience. It's an 8th century monastery which was built at this location. It was obviously really small, and it was rebuilt. Sorry, it was built in 1862, but Guru Padma Sambhava came here in the 8th century and sort of meditated and made this place very, very
Magical.
holy. Yes.
And just out of curiosity, for people who are coming to Bhutan with families, which might
Mm-hmm.
include, teenagers or college kids who could probably run up the mountain a lot faster than the rest of us, but for
Yes.
younger kids, like how, depending upon a fitness level, like how young would you recommend, or how old would you
We have
recommend
had
kids be?
kids who are 8 years, 9 years do the hikes, because what we do then is we give you guides. And for this hike, what we do is the guide and the driver, both of them accompany our guests up, because then if someone's slow, one person takes them, and if someone's faster, then they stick with one, either the guide or the driver. But what happens usually is our guide will make sure that everyone's together. Also, when there are kids in the in the family, then we assign guides who also have kids, so that they are aware of what needs to be done. I have seen pictures of our guides carrying kids on their backs up sometimes, or on their shoulders, because they are quite used to it. I have a guide who has actually gone down and up in 45 minutes.
Wow.
That's how fit they are, and because they're born and brought up there, they do not have issues with breathing and so on. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I mean, that's all taken care of. That's not an issue.
okay, great. Well, I think we were going to touch on some more hikes next about the different valleys and mountains that you can climb while you're in Bhutan.
Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why we actually put a lot of small hikes in each of the valleys that you
Mhm.
visit. Basically, we are preparing you for this one, acclimatizing you, preparing you, so that on the last day when you're doing this hike, you're prepared for it.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the hiking. Great opportunities for hiking in this country, starting with Tiger's Nest and other valleys as well. And most of these hiking trails are actually, old trails that the villagers would use to go between valleys, because there were no roads uh, in Bhutan for a long, long time, until the Indian Prime Minister went over in the 70s, and he told them that, okay, we will help you with building roads, and that's how the first road came from the border of Bhutan into Thimphu.
And this,
So
Rishi, then this is
yeah,
a good opportunity for me to ask you. I hear that there are no stoplights in Bhutan. Is that true?
yes, that's right. Even today, Thimphu doesn't have a stoplight, although the number of vehicles have increased quite a bit. But they're still managing without stoplights, so which is great, and I hope that it'll continue like that.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
All right.
So
Tell us more about the hikes.
yeah, so coming back to the hiking, obviously some of these hikes end up in beautiful monasteries or temples where monks are in retreat. So an opportunity again to interact with these monks as well, or villagers. Also, they afford amazing views. I mean, from what you can see here. So if you go hiking above Dochula, which is in between Thimphu and Punakha, you can see in the winter especially, you can see Gangkar Funsum, which you can see on the left-hand side, top left here in this picture. Beautiful views from there. Then if you go on to Chelela Pass, which is between Paro and Ha Valley in the west, you can see Mount Kanchenjunga from there. You can, in Punaka Valley, you can actually hike up to Hokatso Lake, which is a sacred lake. And here I would like to just bring in something about how these places are protected by culture in Bhutan. You know, the Buddhism here is a mix of Buddhism and Bon religion. Bon religion is basically, worshipping of nature, trees, water, mountains. And that's why you will see that unlike Nepal, none of the high peaks in Bhutan have been climbed yet. None of these lakes you can actually go camping in or destroy, because they really believe that if you upset the deities in these areas, your crops will be a disaster for that year. So things are protected that way. And that's why you have still have majority of the land under forest, beautiful views, beautiful hikes. In Thimphu, you can go up to Phajoling Monastery, which is a good day hike, or a shorter hike can be to Cherry Monastery in Jigme Dorji National Park, which is the northern portion of Thimphu. In Gangte, you can do the Gangte Nature Trail, which is all downhill from the Gangte Monastery into where the cranes are usually in the winter. Or you can go for a tougher long hike, it's called, which will take you about 5 hours again. So beautiful hikes, ample opportunities. In fact, what our guides do is, once someone arrives in the country, even if we have not included enough hikes in the itinerary, and they come to know that they are more interested in hiking rather than doing culture, they will completely alter the itinerary for you, and do things that you like. So there is no hard and fast rule that you have to follow this itinerary just because it's written there. Our guides have the liberty of changing it completely.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, and practicing yoga, it looks like, with stunning views.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, obviously, all these stunning landscapes, give you this opportunity to practice yoga, meditation, as I spoke about earlier. Of course, all the hotels offer yoga. Most of the hotels have a yoga instructor or a yoga buddy that they offer. And we also work with a studio in Thimphu called Manipa Yoga. That's probably Bhutan's first dedicated yoga studio. So you can visit them there as well. And they also run something called Chuniding Foods, which is, making sure that Bhutanese cooking traditions are alive. And, they are very conscious. They cook with local ingredients only, and they teach people. So very interesting setup there.
Oh, we're going to transition a little bit to the off the beaten path places for people. I mean, Bhutan seems like fairly off the beaten path for us anyways, but if you come to Bhutan and you want to go even more off the beaten path, there are some options, including the one we touched on before in eastern Bhutan. Tell us a little bit about these.
So I just wanted to quickly show you a little about Eastern Bhutan, or talk about it, because they have a very different culture to the usual Bhutanese that you'll meet in Western and Central regions. So Eastern Bhutan, especially the areas of Merak and Taktsang, these are areas where you will find the Brokpas, or the Highlanders. And they are basically semi-nomadic tribes. So they only, and this is much higher altitude, so it's quite cold there. So they only spend their winters in the houses that you see in front of you. Very different architecture again from the rest of Bhutan, with very tiny windows or no windows at all. And then in the summer, they take all their yaks and sheep and, go up to the pastures, different pastures, and live there. So very different lifestyle. They live on, their cattle, like yak hair or sheep wool, your milk and dairy products. They make cheese out of that. So when they come down in the winter, they go and sell this in the, or for a long time, they actually used to barter, for staples like rice and so on. So, very interesting lifestyle. So, if you want something different, that's a great place to go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you want to really get away from the crowd, you can always take a helicopter up into the mountains, go to Mount Jamalhari or one of the twin lakes overlooking some snow-capped mountains, have a nice champagne breakfast there. Or, if you're adventurous and really don't mind roughing it out, you can actually go rafting down into India. In fact, we do a rafting trip on a river called the Drangmechu, which is in the south of Bhutan and comes out in Manas National Park in India. And you get to do, grade 4 and grade 5 rapids. So it's mainly for people who have done this before. And you carry everything in your raft. So there are no luxuries. There's just a tent that you carry and a small team which will set it up for you on the riverbank every night. So quite a few off the beaten things that you can do. Go to Tang Valley, which is one of the remote valleys in the Bumthang region. Go horse riding there, explore the valley. So
question
quite
for
a
you,
few
Rishi.
things. Yes.
So if somebody were to go to Eastern Bhutan, they were interested in seeing the culture of the yak herders and such, how many days would that add on to the trip in your recommendation?
That would add on, because a lot of it is actually hiking. So that would add on at least 5 to 6 nights more.
Okay. So a good chunk of time. And then what about for the river rafting piece? How many days would you be at that?
The river rafting would be 4 days on the river.
Okay.
And so you can fly into Bumthang from Paro and then drive to Mongar, spend 1 night there. So about 5 to 6 nights again.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
And there's only one international airport in Bhutan. Is that correct?
That's right. That's Paro.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to fly into Paro or out of Paro. So you have to get there. And then also, this is a good time to point out that majority of the flights are early in the morning into Bhutan or out of Bhutan, especially in March, April, May, because the winds pick up after 12 noon and the airport shuts. So it's very difficult for you to, say, fly in from Bumthang and then connect on an international flight the same day. So you have to end up, spending a night in Paro anyway. Either on the way in or out.
Yeah. Great to know.
So, so otherwise, similarly, like Tang Valley, you have Ha Valley in the west, which is another stunning valley. Not many people go there. This is actually on the border with China. Famous for something called the Hente, which are very unique dumplings to this region, made out of buckwheat, and it has actually turnip leaves and amaranth seeds in it. So very, 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 very different from the usual dumplings or momos that you would be used to, back home.
Well, we are used to momos in my town because we have a Nepalese restaurant, and I love momos. How similar is the food in Bhutan to Nepal or other neighboring countries?
Quite different, really. Like I was saying before, because Bhutan didn't have roads and access between valleys was minimal. So all these passes because people used to walk between these valleys, most of these passes would shut in the winter because of snow or, ice. And that's why what people would do is they would, dry their stuff. In fact, you will notice that because of this, even the architecture is influenced by that. The top of the buildings are usually open. There is a gap between where the floor ends and the roof. Basically, the ceiling ends and the roof, because that's where they used to dry all their meats, their vegetables, and so on. So a lot of the food is influenced by dry meat and dry vegetables. Also, things that grow in Bhutan. So you have rice, you have chilies, you have potatoes, you have a lot of cheese because you have a lot of dairy. So one of the main dishes in Bhutan is actually called kewa datsi or ema datsi, which is basically chili and cheese or chili and potato. So they treat chili as a vegetable rather than a spice actually
Spice.
in
Yeah.
Bhutan. So very different to Nepal, because Nepal also has the Indian influence in terms of food. So you'll get a lot of dal, curries, in Nepal, which you will not find in Bhutan.
Okay, great. Well, let's touch on some of the fascinating people you can meet and some of the exclusive experiences and even some of your favorite places before we transition to talk about all the amazing hotels.
Sure. So one of the persons that I personally really like, guests to meet is Mainak Tulku Rinpoche. He is one of the Rinpoches who shifted here about 30 years ago from Tibet. Uh, and he's the 12th reincarnate actually of Mainak Rinpoche. So very, very learned, very, very highly respected in Buddhism. He was also the founder and director of the National Museum in Paro and the National Library in Thimphu for a long time. Uh, amazing person, very humble, great person to meet if you want to understand how what Buddhism is and how it's different, say in Tibet or in Nepal or in Bhutan or in different parts of the world, say in Southeast Asia to this region. So he will be able to tell you about that. The other person who we like meeting is a historian, Dasho Karma Ura. He is Bhutan's first graduate, first person to actually who has come out of Oxford University. Um, Currently an advisor to the monarch there in Bhutan, and also written many books, out of which the most famous one is about the political and cultural life, from the beginning when Bhutan was formed until the 70s, late 70s, basically.
And
So another enlightening person to meet there.
well, I will say that when I took my kids to Thailand, we did meet with some monks and had conversations with them about what their life was like, and even participated in giving them alms. And it's a really unique cultural experience to be able to have that back and forth dialogue for curious kids or teenagers or any of us, to learn more about the religion and what their everyday life is like. So I highly recommend that one.
Absolutely. I mean, the guests will be meeting with, when they go to the nunnery or to the monk school in Gangte, they will get to meet monks and nuns and interact with them. But meeting with Mainak Tulku Rinpoche is truly a different experience. We've had guests who have met him and they have been completely floored. So
Yeah,
I can completely relate to that.
I'm putting it on my list.
Absolutely. Otherwise, there are some basic experiences that you can do which are quite private. For example, what we can do in Gangte Valley is, go and meet the High Lama or Tulku in Gangte Monastery. There, for our guests, we have done in the past a private blessing ceremony, which is known as the Shivang Ceremony. This is basically for wish fulfillment and long life. And then what the Chulku or the High Lama does is he does a personal tour of the monastery, an interaction with the guests. And then we organize a beautiful breakfast at the monastery courtyard. Um, of course, everyone's heard of the festivals in Bhutan. Uh, they are amazing. Like I mentioned earlier, they are the means of, educating people. You have all these beautiful, colorful dances with masks on, telling people about the different, teachings of Buddhism. This is also an opportunity where all the villagers come together, or all the people in the valley come together in their finest silks. So you get to see all these colorful attires everywhere, which you will also see when you are here, because thanks to GNH, people do wear their traditional attire even on a day-to-day basis. But it can get crowded. So if someone's not looking at visiting a very crowded place, especially post-COVID, what we can do is, if you're in a group or even if you're traveling as a family, we can look at organizing a private festival for you in a small village, where the village comes together and performs a festival for you.
Yeah,
So quite interesting, really.
that sounds lovely, actually. All right. Well, what about we're going to talk right about one other person to meet, and then I think
Yes.
transition into your favorites. Tell us about her.
Yeah, so I just wanted to also touch on, visiting a museum in Tang Valley, which is basically, which gives you an insight into how the noble families in Bhutan. So basically, each valley has a noble family and how they used to live.
Mm.
And there, what we can do is meet with Aji Kunzang Shoden. She is a descendant, obviously, of this royal family, and she's also the first Bhutanese woman to write books in English, or publish books, basically. So we can do a private tour of this museum with her, who then she talks, where she talks about her family and what each of these items in the museum were used for in the olden days, how they used to migrate from Tang Valley in the winter to another valley because it used to get so cold there, and so on. So very interesting experience. Um, yeah.
Okay, so for people who are just listening, you can't see these delicious pictures of foods that you can have when you're in Bhutan, and even Bhutanese beer. So Rishi, tell us a little bit about some of your favorite places to go just for fun.
Yeah, I just thought, because I've been living there for the last 5 years, instead of talking to you about Bhutanese food only, which you will get to have when you are here, and especially there is a really nice restaurant at the Tashi called Chik Jigye, which is the only Bhutanese fine dining restaurant in Bhutan, I think.
Mm.
But all the hotels obviously offer you a Bhutanese meal at some point, and you will get to taste the traditional Bhutanese meal. Um, but what I really wanted to focus on is, there are some of these Bhutanese youngsters who have, say, worked outside Bhutan and then have come back and started some really nice cafes and restaurants where they're doing fusion food. For example, there's this guy who trained as a pizza chef in, I think, Boston or somewhere, or in New York, and he came back and he started a pizza place, but he does pizzas with Bhutanese flavors and ingredients. So you will find a kiwadatsi or a emadatsi pizza, which is basically a chili cheese or a potato cheese pizza. Or what he has done is, he has taken an apple pie and transformed it into an apple pie momo, or a dumpling. So things like that. There is a place which gives you brilliant burgers with a Bhutanese twist. So things like that are on offer as well. Plus, you have Bhutan has now got, I think, 3 microbreweries doing some really good beers. Especially the wheat beer is really good, but they also do a red rice lager, because rice is the staple, and red rice is the staple in Bhutan. Uh, the Bhutanese eat red rice 3 times a day, and this lager is actually very interesting, very lovely tasting as well. So when you're in Paro, a visit to the Namgye Artisanal Brewery is quite interesting as well. Another of our favorites, in fact, it's not just my favorite, but a favorite amongst all the locals and the expats living in Thimphu, is known as Mojo Park. So this is actually a bar, but they have local bands performing every Wednesdays and on every weekend. So Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, you will have this place which is packed with locals and expats and tourists at times, and enjoying the music and enjoying their beers and drinks. So a great place to visit, which not many people visiting Bhutan know about. So
Well, I think what's fun about that is when you're coming with teenagers or college kids, or maybe kids in their 20s, seeing what sort of real life is like for kids about their age
absolutely.
in another country is a really fun way to experience it with, surrounded by local people instead of tourists.
Absolutely. I mean, I have met so many tourists here, and they're always talking about how they just, were going past and they heard all this music and walked in. Otherwise, they had never heard of it, or no one had told them about it. So it's great. And yes, you are right. I mean, Of course, the younger, when there's a family visiting, it's the younger crowd who usually tends to come out in the evening. But
Yeah.
I have seen other people as well. I mean, people who are staying in hotels nearby just walk in after their dinner. Other than that, you have the local handicrafts market in Thimphu, which is very interesting. These are small little huts, and these are run mainly by the women. And these women are the ones who produce, right from textiles to all these trinkets and things that you will find in these shops. So quite good, quite nice to support the local, women there.
Yeah.
So very interesting as well. A very interesting walk to see what their textiles are like and what you can take back as a souvenir.
Right.
Otherwise, while living there, I used to absolutely love going out on the weekends for picnics. Lots of rivers in most of the valleys, so you can just and in fact, this is a culture amongst the Bhutanese as well.
Hmm.
On the weekends, you will see the locals pack their lunches and drive to a beautiful area and just sit there and enjoy their meal.
Hmm.
So we love doing a picnic for our guests as well coming to the country. So in Punakha, Thimphu, you can sit by the river, enjoy a meal. Or if you're in Gangte Valley, which is the only glacial valley in Bhutan, you can actually enjoy a picnic overlooking the valley. Otherwise, the other interesting thing to do in Bhutan, which is quite relaxing, is a hot stone bath. You will find the locals doing it next to rivers. So this hot stone bath is basically a tub with cold water and a local Bhutanese herb in it. And what they do is they heat up these stones from the river, and when it becomes really red hot, they plonk it into the water so that the water heats up, and this basically releases the minerals in the stone and is supposed to be very good for you. So
Hmm.
they then soak in it. So this is really good when you're doing it. So some of the potato farmers, what they do in Gangte is they have started their little hot stone baths, so you can overlook the valley and sit in these baths. You can see one of the images there on the right.
Yeah.
So quite an interesting experience. Obviously, the hotels also offer this in their spas, but obviously doing it in a local setting is quite different.
Absolutely. And sometimes preferred. Um,
Yes.
well, I think picnics are one of my favorite things. Whatever country you're in, you can have a picnic somewhere, and it often brings you to nature and eating delicious bites of food while you're just, not rushing around, but,
Mhm.
acting like, again, like you live there, which is wonderful. Okay, so we're going to touch on all the amazing places that you can stay, and we don't have a ton of time for that, but maybe you
Yeah,
could just sort of quickly
I'll
quickly walk
just
us
quickly
through,
glide through it. Yeah.
the
Uh,
different areas and all that. Okay.
So luckily, Bhutan has some stunning properties. What I have shown you is just the gist of it. You have the famous brands, but there are also some boutique properties which are really, really nice. For example, I told you before that my favorite lodge in Gangte Valley, for that matter, in the whole of Bhutan, is called the Gangte Lodge, which is a boutique five-star property run by a couple. Uh, who live in Australia, and they
Mm.
fell in love with the country when they came here, and they built this lodge. And the most beautiful thing about this lodge is it completely blends into the landscape. It just looks like a farmhouse from the distance. Other than that, you have the well-known brands like Aman, who have 5 lodges in all the 5 valleys. You have Six Senses, who have 5 lodges in, again, all the 5 valleys. Then you have Como, who have 2 hotels, one in Punakha, one in Paro. There is another standalone, nice, beautiful property called the Bhutan Spirit Sanctuary. This is basically Bhutan's first property, which is an all-inclusive wellness property. So when you stay here, all your spa is also included in your stay. So getting a consultation with a traditional medicine doctor, going for your massages, everything is included.
Mm.
Um, then And Beyond is starting their first property in Southeast Asia in Punakha. It's called the And Beyond Punakha River Lodge. What we're trying to do is trying to be a little different from everyone else, since we are at a lower altitude, a more temperate climate. We actually went with tents, which are luxurious rooms. And then we have a couple of villas. Other than that, there are some 4-star options like the Taj Tashi, the Le Meridien in Punakha, in Paro. Then you have the Dhensa in Punakha, and then the Jiwaling in Paro. Apart from that, there are other 3-star and tourist standard properties. But I just quickly wanted to mention over here that in Bhutan, there is a slight mismatch, which is why I like to clarify this, because hotels are generally more expensive than the rest of the world. So, when people say, when someone says 4-star, they get a 5-star pricing, people get a shock because, they weren't expecting that. But the reason for that is, most of these hotels do usually 6 months of business. Everything is imported from Thailand or from India. So that's why the pricing is quite high, actually.
Mm-hmm. And I think for people, we're going to touch on it at the end, but it's almost the end, so I'll say it now.
Mm-hmm.
The government of Bhutan highly regulates tourism and people coming in. And so there are some expenses related to going to Bhutan that are unique and different than going any other place. And that adds to the cost as well. So for people who think about Southeast Asia as typically a less expensive tourist destination, Bhutan does not fall into that category.
That is correct. I mean, there is a daily fee that a guest needs to pay when you visit Bhutan. And that's primarily because Bhutan basically wants you to spend a minimum amount of $250 per person when you are in Bhutan. And that's basically, they don't want, backpackers like in Nepal coming into the country and making it very crowded. So that's the reason behind that. And part of this fee, actually, you are utilizing in your hotel, in your guide, your driver. And a part of this fee actually goes to the government so that they can improve their education and healthcare.
And when you are staying at these 5-star properties or even 4-star properties, you will have no problem whatsoever in meeting the minimum spend of the day.
Absolutely. That's not an issue at all.
And so before we transition from this slide, I have to ask you about the rhinoceros. So for those who can't see it, there's a humongous rhinoceros.
So this is basically, I wanted to quickly tell you, if you're coming all the way to Bhutan and you have more time, what you can connect, with Bhutan. So obviously India is a very good option because you have daily flights from there. But you also have Nepal, which is, daily direct flights from Nepal to Bhutan. So if you want to cover Nepal, you can do that, visiting Mount Everest, going to all the famous sites in Kathmandu and Patan and, Bhaktapur, or going to Pokhara and seeing the beautiful mountain ranges, or hiking there, or going on safari at Chitwan National Park and seeing the one-horned rhino. So that's an option. And then if you have even more time or you want to explore something unique, you can even go up to Tibet from Nepal. So you have Nepal and Tibet and then Bhutan. So quite a few options really in terms of connection. And not only that, you can also actually connect to Sri Lanka. So if you are looking for some really unique wildlife like leopards and elephants and so on, you can actually fly into Sri Lanka through Delhi or through Thailand. Again, Thailand also has direct flights to Bhutan every day. So you can either fly into Thailand, into Bangkok and connect the same day, and you'll be in Sri Lanka by evening, because most of the flights leave Bhutan early in the morning. There you can explore the beaches, spend time by the seaside, or go up into the hill country and stay in the tea estates. And as I said earlier, go for safari at Yala National Park or Wilpatu National Park. So quite a few options.
Yeah, a lot of options. So we could all spend 6 months over there in this part of the world. We'd be in good shape. But for those of us who can't, what would you say if you weren't tacking on, East Bhutan and the rafting and that area? If someone were to come and do a Bhutan respectable amount of time in the country, how long would you say that should be?
So ideally, most people spend about 5 to 7 nights, depending on how much time they have. But I usually say 7 to 8 nights to cover the most common valleys, which is Thimphu, Punakha, Gangte. At least you should cover these four, which is Thimphu, Punakha, Gangte, and Paro.
Hmm.
And then if you have time, say 10 nights or so on, you can include Bumthang as well. And then if you want to, include Eastern Bhutan as well, you add another week to it.
Okay.
So ideal would be anything from 7 to 12 nights in Bhutan.
Okay.
And then you increase depending on what else you want to do.
And how
Or
much?
if you want to do a trek, a 3-night trek or a 4-night trek or a longer trek, you can increase it
Yeah.
accordingly.
I mean, to me, it seemed like such an ideal destination to bring my daughter as a graduation present from high school or college. It's a great place to go for parents with kids where you're being active and doing things and spending time together. So as far as best time, somebody wrote in asking, what are the best times to visit Bhutan in terms of the months related to the weather or festivals and things like that?
So, Bhutan, most people consider the peak season to be March, April, May, and then September, October, November.
Okay.
So that's the 6 months that they consider peak season. And most of these festivals but that's because most of these festivals take place around in these months in different valleys. But, living there, I actually quite enjoy the winter. Because number one, that's when we get clear blue skies. That's when you get absolutely stunning views of the mountains, because you get all these snow-capped views at that time from all the high passes. Also, in the daytime, the sun is out, so it's not as cold as people think it will be.
Okay.
There are very few days in a year, and at times there have been years that we didn't even get snow. So even if it snows, we get it for just 2 or 3 days, and that's about it in a year. So I would say if you're, and especially December during the festive season, that is Christmas and New Year, that's quite busy again in Bhutan. But other than that, December, January, February, I love that time because there are very few people in the country. And because even the local Bhutanese, a lot of them actually not migrate, but they just fly out to Thailand or India to spend their, kids' holidays. So you'll find it to be very, very peaceful, actually.
Okay.
So there is no set time. Yes, monsoon. Although we don't get monsoons like in India or Nepal, we do get monsoons in June and July. Or rather July and August. It's towards the mid or end of June that it starts. The rains basically start. So or if someone's looking for a greener Bhutan, then those are the months to come. Otherwise, the peak season is March, April, May, and then September, October, November.
Okay. And so what about some tips about altitude sickness or acclimatizing to the altitude, as well as all of the winding roads that I know are around the country? What are your suggestions for those?
Yeah. So, the thing is, what we do is we try to go as slow as possible. Usually, the roads are good in Bhutan now, so winding roads are not so much of a problem. But if you do get sick, if you're prone to it, basically, if you already know that you get it, I would advise speak to your doctor and carry the medication. Usually. We do have it with us as well, but it's always better to talk to your doctor and get the medication with you. So there are tablets, or now I think get a patch which you put behind the ear, and which helps you with not getting nausea when you're on the winding roads or the altitude. In terms of altitude sickness, that's why what we try to do is make sure that you're not going up, say, for example, to Gangte on the very next day of arrival, or you're not hiking up to Tiger's Nest on the very next day of arrival into Bhutan. We get you to acclimatize. For example, Thimphu is around 2,000 meters, so you spend 2 days there. Then you go to Punakha, which is about 1,200 meters, so you go and spend time there. And after that you go up to Gangte, where you are at 3,000 meters. So that way, you are acclimatizing slowly and not all of a sudden going into a very high altitude.
Yeah. I think that strategically that's a good decision. So definitely be thoughtful about what the order of your plans are. Terrific. Well, Rishi, you are a wealth of information. I thank you so much for joining us and sharing about the culture of Bhutan and your expertise. I'm certainly looking forward to getting there myself and in sending some travelers over there to you as well. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you for having me. I mean, it was a pleasure. I hope to see you guys soon.
Absolutely. Us too. Take care.